countdown, we have the gas-resistant stroller. When you go out for a walk with the little guys right now, you might throw them in a stroller. It's probably the easiest way to get from A to B without having to wait for the little kids to catch up. They always want to stop and pick up a rock that's smooth. Like, what is it with smooth rocks that seem so cool? Anyways, back in the day when there was a concern about chemical attacks, a gas-resistant stroller was made. The gas-resistant stroller was what looks like a metal coffin on wheels. It was all the rage when mustard gas wasn't yet a war crime. It would pair nicely with a gas mask that your mom could wear as she pushed you through the streets. Honestly, it's pretty terrifying, not gonna lie. I'm glad that this isn't a thing anymore. Over to you, Rachel.
Coming in at number 9, the Fliz. You know that one of the safest parts about riding a bike is the fact that you can get into any sort of accident and you're not attached to it. You can kind of just fly off and jump off before you land in a mud puddle or scrape your knee or whatever. Another great part of a bike is that it has pedals and gears, so you can move much faster than if you were running or walking, which is kind of the idea. Even if you're out of shape and you haven't done a lot of cardio, like the people who get up at 4 a.m. and go for runs, oh my god, those people are like on another tier, they're like gods. Then you can definitely go really fast on a bike if you want to. And what on earth is a Fliz? This thing is what happens when you mix a jolly jumper with a bike and are willing to look embarrassing for everyone to see. The Fliz is a bike with no pedals, so you have to push with your feet like a Flintstone. And now this obviously sucks because you wouldn't really be able to move very fast at all. They also built a harness into it so you can hang in there like you're some sort of baby Bjorn. Usually when you invent a new thing, the goal is to try and make it better than the last version of said thing instead of making it worse or really stupid. So I don't think the guy who strolls in on the Fliz is going to have a swarm of men or women around them being like, oh my god, marry me, I love you, because they look so sexy. They'll probably be looking at him being like, what? Is he okay? And how do you go uphill with this thing? You have to just run up the hill as you're attached to a bike? What is the point of being the bike then?
In our 8th spot, we have bat bombs. Yeah, not bath bombs, bat bombs. This next one is not only terrifying, but also deadly. When it comes to warfare, people can get pretty inventive. Imagine you're stalking past enemy lines in the dead of night, when all of a sudden, a web-winged furry creature swoops in and drops a bomb right at your feet. Bat bombs were an experimental weapon developed in World War II, and they are exactly as they sound. It was a bat with a bomb attached to it. This would detonate on or near enemies. The plan was developed and submitted by Lytle S. Adams, a dentist from Irwin, Pennsylvania. He presented his idea to the White House just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and they liked it and the project was greenlit. The doc assembled an oddball team, including a pilot turned actor, an ex-gangster, and an ex-hotel manager. The project was disbanded in 1943 because it was surpassed by a deadlier project. Stay tuned for that one later on in the list.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Urban Baby Window Cage. I can definitely see how this is appealing. Like, you want to make sure your baby gets a lot of fresh air, but you don't have time to take them for a walk when they're young. The Urban Window Baby Cage was basically a chain link cage with a pillow inside of it, so you could just plop your baby inside and go, look, a bird. Jimmy? Apparently everyone back then would have been totally fine with Michael Jackson dangling his baby outside his window because that's what they all did, apparently. The purpose of this contraption was so that your baby could get a little fresh air because you don't want your baby to get all stuffy in your New York apartment that's the size of a shoebox. And this was in a time when elevators were both scarce and the chance of them killing you was much higher. Think Tower of Terror, but real life. So walking that potentially very chubby baby up and down 30 flights of stairs doesn't seem very fun as just hanging him outside a window so you can feel the sun in his face and hear all the slurs that New York construction workers offer to the patrons on the sidewalks. If your kid ever gets out of line, you can just throw them in the cage for a timeout. You know? That's, this is why we should forget this. It's not a good idea, guys. Let's just stick with like jolly jumpers and cribs that are inside. That sounds like a better idea.
In our 6th spot, we have the hydrogen blimps. Hydrogen blimps are labeled as one of the worst inventions of all time. Basically, it was like a big balloon in the sky. It would be pushed by propellers, and guess what they would put into the balloon to make it float? Hydrogen. Hydrogen was cheaper and more readily available, so they used it. Just there's one tiny issue with that. It was highly flammable. But they would pile people into this blimp that was fueled by hydrogen. And sadly, they would explode. In 1937, the Hindenburg, a German airship, caught fire and crashed in 36 seconds. It was very sad and very disastrous. But that wasn't even the first time that one exploded. Just after the Hindenburg, that's when people were like, "Okay, maybe this isn't safe." Now, history should never be forgotten. But maybe let's just never bring back hydrogen blimps, okay?
Coming in at number 5, we have plastic. I acknowledge that plastic has helped us get this far. It has been an important part of our development as a species. But just like when a young adult who has to shed their trauma that made them funny, but keep the funny, it's time for us to move on from the thing that is choking our planet. Like if you go outside right now and get a box of tea, the tea will come in a box that is wrapped in plastic. The box is already a container for the tea. Why are we double wrapping it, you know? I know the purpose is to increase the shelf life, but maybe we shouldn't be keeping things on shelves that long. Maybe? I don't know. We should seek out healthier food that doesn't last as long because it doesn't have as many preservatives. Thus, it would be stupid to wrap it in plastic. Just wrap it in paper or pour it into my hands. I don't know, just do it. Or have no packaging and everyone just goes to bulk barns and puts it in glass jars and everything like that. I think that's a pretty good idea, but you know, who knows. The plastic, it lasts a little too long. Let's just say that.
In our 4th spot, we have the brazen bull. This is one of history's most horrific inventions. The brazen bull was a torture device used in ancient Greece around 560 BC. A seaside colony called Ocrigus was ruled over by a man named Phalaris. This device was commissioned for him. He wanted to turn torture into music. His court sculpture created this unique nightmarish piece. It was a hollow sculpture of a bull with bells and whistles attached, and there was enough room for the victim to be placed inside of it. The bull would then be placed over a roaring fire, and instead of screams, it was designed to sound like the grunts of a bull. Now, some say this invention was a myth, but famed poet Cicero states that, in fact, the bull did exist and was used. This remains one of the most evil inventions in history.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Tricho System. There are plenty of ways to get rid of hair in places you don't want them to be. There's waxing, shaving, electrolysis, but this one invention deserves to be mentioned just one more time before we let history completely forget it. Never do this again. The Tricho System was a hair removal device that became a must-have in every salon in the 1920s, and it actually worked. It would remove the hair painlessly and effortlessly. All you had to do was sit at a mahogany desk and face a small window. When the flip was switched, there was no burning, just a slight hum from the machine. But had some horrendous side effects. Yes, it would remove all the hair, but soon men and women would develop cancerous ulcers, carcinoma, and death. The reason? They were using X-ray technology, which is, as we know, radioactive. It would be administered to the skin for a few minutes and require anywhere between 15 to 20 treatments to be effective. X-ray technology was used for a variety of skin treatments around the time, and even in the late 1800s, like for ringworm and eczema. But when the Tricho machine was released, however, there was no mention of what the technology they were using was. They were just like, the Tricho miracle. You know, just picture like a typical 1920s ad. And the person administering it wasn't well qualified and didn't know what it was either. They just were like, flip switch, and it works. Clients were just marveled that it worked so well until it slowly burned their faces off. Of course, hindsight is 2020. How they were to know. Let's just put this embarrassing, dangerous blunder to the side, shall we?
In our 2nd spot, we have Agent Orange. This next one we're going to talk about should kind of be remembered so that no one ever does anything so awful ever again. Agent Orange was a pesticide that was responsible for 400,000 fatalities, disabilities, and 500,000 birth defects. It was invented by plant biologist Arthur Galston in 1943. He created it as a way to help accelerate the growth of soybeans in places with a short growing season. But in large doses, it actually destroyed crops, and the US decided to take this technology and abuse it. During the War of Vietnam, they sprayed the land, and 4.5 million acres of crops in Vietnam were destroyed by Agent Orange. And any exposure the Vietnamese and US, Australian, and New Zealand soldiers had to this pesticide came with deadly consequences. It caused an abnormal amount of miscarriages, extreme birth defects, cancer, and skin conditions. Some of the land still can't even be used to this day. It's very tragic and scary.
Coming in at number 1, we have the atom bomb. If the name Robert Oppenheimer doesn't ring any bells, maybe this will. Coming in at number 1, we have the atomic bomb. See, there it is. Robert Oppenheimer invented the atomic bomb, and the first one that successfully detonated created a mushroom cloud 40,000 feet high. What people did with this new invention, however, stole an unfathomable amount of lives and opened doors for even more deadly weapons. It also led to one of the most terrifying standoffs in history during the 1960s called the Cuban Missile Crisis. The USA and Soviet Russia were caught in a standoff, both with nukes pointing at each other, waiting for the other to press the big red button. Thankfully, neither did, but many countries have nukes in their arsenal ready to strike whenever they want, and they're also still used in a lot of battles and war today. Considering how much damage was done to Nagasaki and Hiroshima due to the detonations of Fat Man and Little Boy in 1945, oh man, I hope that day never comes, and they just should get rid of them. Like, no country should just have them, because we definitely know that it will lead to the destruction of the world if they're ever used. So we just should make an agreement that get rid, we forget, destroy all the ways of making them, just let's get rid. Albert Einstein was the man who prompted the USA to invent the atom bomb in order to combat the Germans in World War II. He believed the Germans were working on the bomb as well, but he found out too late that that wasn't the case, and they weren't even as far as he thought they were. He immediately regretted his decision, which is why the atomic bomb makes our list of inventions we should all forget. Just get rid of it. He's not the only one who wished it never existed. He's not the only one who wished it never existed. We should just get rid of it. Like, what it...
In our 9th spot, we have the mousetrap pistol. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up. You guys already know the drill. So this was an invention that seemed like a good idea at the time, but in the end, it was found faulty for a number of reasons. So in 1882, a man named James A. Williams from Texas decided to create a trap, and I quote, by which animals which burrow in the ground can be destroyed. He then took inspiration by burglar alarms from the 19th century, which was basically a pistol rigged on a contraption that would go off when someone opened a window or door. He thought that if it worked for humans, it would work for rodents too. So basically, his invention consisted of a revolver or pistol attached to basically a mousetrap. When the mouse set it off, the weapon would go off. So you see how problematic that would be? It would kill the mouse, but also take out chunks of your floor. And imagine if your foot accidentally triggered that trap. Ouch. So you can see why this invention never really took off. In our 8th spot, we have the blood-powered lamp. Okay, the award for the strangest invention goes to this one. The blood-powered lamp is exactly what it sounds like. It's a lamp that was powered by your blood. It was also called the Dracula bulb. It was created by a man named Mike Thompson from the Netherlands, and he designed and created it not too long ago, just in 2007. You know, a time where we have electricity. So I don't know why he thought this was a good invention, but it is kind of cool, so I'll give him that. Anyways, basically, the lamp contains luminol, which is what forensic scientists use to see if there's any blood at crime scenes. Luminol reacts with the iron in blood, and as a result, it creates this bright blue glow. So this guy thought it would be a good idea to make a lamp out of luminol. Only thing is that you need to cut yourself every time that you want to use it. Basically, to use the lamp, first you mix an activating powder. Then you break the ball. You cut yourself, and then you add your blood in it. As a result, the lamp will start to glow. Like I said, it's kind of cool, but also kind of really unnecessary. Coming in at number 7, we have the Pear of Anguish. This was another disgusting medieval torture device. So the Pear of Anguish, sometimes called the choke pear, was this pear-shaped metal device that you never want to be subjected to. So basically, this device was inserted into a victim's downstairs area, or their mouth. Then they could turn the screw attached to this device and the pair pieces would bloom, basically expanding, and it would stretch your openings. It was often used to get information or a confession out of someone. Basically, the device will get so uncomfortable that you'll either cave in or it'll rip your skin apart. What's sick is that they didn't want to use this device to kill someone. No, they wanted it to just stretch them apart slowly to cause immense pain that lasts for hours or even days. In our 6th spot, we have the Scold's Brittle. This terrifying looking mask thing is referred to as the Scold's Brittle. The first recorded use of this device was back in 1564 Scotland. Shortly after, England started using them as well. Basically, this mask was a form of public humiliation and torture. Basically, women were forced to wear this as a form of punishment for behaving immodest or rude, or if they were accused of infidelity or witchcraft. So this mask would be locked on over their head, so they couldn't remove it. Then there was a spike mouthpiece attached to it, so they weren't allowed to speak. They then had to walk around in public wearing it. It was meant to inflict pain on the person while simultaneously causing public humiliation. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Iron Maiden, and I'm not talking about the band here. Chances are you have heard of this disturbing invention. Basically, it was a coffin-like device that was lined with spikes. The victim was then placed in the coffin, and then the executioner would close the door. The spikes were then shot directly into the victim's body. But here's the thing. They specifically positioned the spikes so that the victim wouldn't die immediately. Instead, it would be a slow and painful death where they just slowly bled out. That is terrifying. Also, who is responsible for cleaning that device? Because that would suck. Coming in at number 4, we have the spike collar. So picture the Iron Maiden, and now picture it around your neck. That's basically what the spike collars were. A collar with spikes all on the inside. It was then placed on a victim and the spikes would dig into their necks. What's worse than the discomfort is the fact that they wouldn't be able to lay down or sleep. They also couldn't eat or drink, so they would just suffer with this thing on for days on end. For prisoners, after the collar was placed on their neck, it was then fastened with ropes to the 4 walls in the room. The prisoner would stand in the middle. If they moved even an inch in one direction, the spikes would impale them, so they would have to stand incredibly still. In our 3rd spot, we have the rack. Although this invention doesn't have a scary name, don't be deceived. It is very gruesome. This was a popular torture device from medieval Europe. Basically, the victim would have their ankles and wrists tied to this device so that they were spread open. Then 2 executioners would crank the gears and the machine would slowly pull their limbs in the opposite directions, stretching them farther and farther apart until eventually they were ripped right off. I'm telling you, people back in the day were sick. Seriously, imagine if we used this now for criminals. That would never fly. Moving on at number 2, we have the dimple machine. Everyone is born with unique features. Maybe you have a butt chin, or unique birthmarks, or dimples. Now, if you don't have dimples, don't worry. There's a device that will give you some. Back in 1936, a woman named Isabella Gilbert created a device that will give people dimples. You know, if you weren't born with them and you were jealous. So basically how this works is the dimpleless person would place this contraption over their face. The device had 2 sets of knobs on either side of it that would poke into your skin. It was believed that if you were to wear this long enough, then it would train your cheeks to create dimples on their own. I'm sorry, no, that looks terrifying and also painful. And in our number 1 spot, we have the electric smile. Back in 2011 in Japan, a very weird invention was made to help children smile. It's crazy. So basically, it forces kids to smile by sending electric shocks to the kids' cheeks. This causes the face muscles to contract and voila, you got a smile. This is wrong on so many levels, but it was targeted towards parents as a method to snap their kids out of a tantrum or to make sure they are looking perfect out in public. Here's the creepy part. The shock is so strong that the smile can last for days. And a side effect is that it can cause some twitching. Like I said before, this invention is just so wrong on so many levels. I can't believe it's a real thing. Starting off this countdown, we have the iron chair. Imagine the Iron Maiden, but in chair form. Basically, this was a torture device used in the Middle Ages. Victims were placed onto a chair that was filled with hundreds of sharp spikes. There could be anywhere from 500 to 1,500 spikes. They were strapped into the chair, and when their restraints were tightened, the spikes would dig into their flesh. And they often left the victims there for hours, even sometimes days, just suffering. Sometimes there was a hole on the seat and then a fire was lit below them. But the most common way this chair was used for was actually psychological torture. The victim was often strapped in and then would have to watch another person die in front of them. It was either you confess to your crimes, or you die from the chair, or die another painful death like the person you saw die. This device was used until the late 1800s in Europe. And at number 9, we have the chain smoker, and I'm not talking about the band here. But if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps me out. This invention was created for those who wanted to smoke not 1, not 2, but 20 cigarettes at one time. That is lung cancer just waiting to happen. But it was pretty popular in the mid-20th century. So this invention was bad for a number of reasons. Number 1, cigarettes can kill. Imagine smoking 20 at once. Think about what that would do to your teeth, gums, skin, and lungs. Also, think about how expensive it would be to fuel that addiction. In our 8th spot, we have the breaking wheel. The breaking wheel was an ancient device used to torture and/or kill prisoners. Typically, it was used during public executions. Basically, how this device works is it's a giant wheel with spokes. The person was then strapped to the wheel and then beat, or the wheel was slammed down on them. The most common thing would be having them lay on the wheel, and then the executioner would hit them. Their body was woven between the spokes of the wheel so that when they were hit, their limbs would give away and break. It's really gruesome. Either they were hit until death, or they were just left there after being badly injured to die a slow, painful death. Moving on to number 7, we have the beauty micrometer. This device was basically a way to make you feel really crappy about your appearance. So it was designed in the 1930s and was used as a beauty calibrator to see how beautiful you were and what areas needed more work. And those areas that needed work were where the makeup was applied. The machine itself looked like a medieval torture device with like screws and these weird strips attached to it. The machine itself was made by beautician Max Factor Sr. Yes, a man telling women how to look. Anyways, this machine is terrifying, and its users would often have terrible headaches after wearing this device. Coming in at number 6, we have the mass shaving machine. And this invention is exactly what it sounds like. This was popular back in the 19th century. It allowed barbers to shave 12 men at the exact same time. This device would first coat everyone's face with shaving cream or whatever they used back then, and then there was a blade hooked onto it, and it would go and shave the men's face. No. Just no. Everyone has different face shapes. That blade could come down and slice your face or something. I'm just glad it isn't around today. I know everyone wants efficiency, but this invention could go wrong for a number of reasons. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the flatulence filtering underwear. This one has got to be the weirdest one on this list. Basically, if you're a person that has really bad gas, don't worry. This underwear has got you covered. Basically, if you toot, the underwear somehow filters it so no odor comes out. No, I'm sorry, that's just weird as heck. Please, let's not make this a thing. Next thing you know, a company is gonna come out with like underwear that makes your farts smell like things like strawberries or marshmallows. I don't need this becoming a trend, okay? Like, ooh, who has the best farts? No. Moving on to number 4, we have the creeping baby. If dolls creep you out, then you would not be a fan of this invention at all. In 1871, a man named George P. Clark invented this doll baby thing. His goal was to make a doll that crawls exactly how a baby does. But boy, did it turn out really creepy. So the doll's head, arms, and legs were made out of painted plaster. From there, they were hinged onto a brass clockwork body. The doll then moves forward by rolling along on 2 toothed wheels. But honestly, it just looks like a creepy robot baby. So not only is this doll terrifying looking, but it can slowly creep along. Yeah, no, just no. Let's just leave it in the past. No, thank you. In our third spot, we have the revolver camera. Again, it's just as it sounds. Basically, it was a gun that would take a picture when you pull the trigger. Yeah, you heard me correctly. It was meant to take a photo exactly when the bullet hit the target. Okay, but don't worry, there were no bullets in the camera when they took the photos. Basically, in around 1938, this device was created. A tiny camera was attached to the underside of the barrel and the front of the trigger guard. It was attached so that every time the trigger was pulled, it would snap a photo. Now, there's no evidence that this gun was actually used. They only used it for trial photo shoots. And like I said, it was used without bullets. Or so that's what historians assume. Sadly, we don't know much about this invention and its purpose. Was someone trying to make something cool? Or did they want to take photos of their victims? Either way, that would be super bad to bring back. You can imagine why. Like, here, let me take your photo, and then everyone screams and runs away. Moving on to number 2, we have the thumb screws. This was a common form of interrogation used in medieval Europe. If the criminal was not behaving or giving the information that they wanted, then they would resort to using this device. Basically, it was a vice that would clamp down on a person's thumbs or fingers. Then the vice was slowly tightened, putting more and more pressure on the person's thumbs. Also, they were locked in place with a padlock, so they couldn't escape. They were left there until they made a confession. If not, their fingers were shattered. And in our number 1 spot, we have the head crusher. Just the sound of this invention alone is gnarly, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The device was basically a vice for the head. I know, it's gross. So basically, it was a metal device that hooked onto a person's jaw and then head. Then the executioner would twist the handle and it would push the head and jaw together. And then you get it. I'm telling you, there were some pretty sick people back in the day. They had fun with torture. On top of that, some versions of this device had a little thing at the front to catch the victim's eyeballs when they popped out. Yum. Starting off this countdown, we have the smile mask. In the wake of World War I, Budapest, Hungary saw a lot of their residents take their own lives. One way they thought they could handle this problem was through smile school. Yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. It started as a joke by Professor Gino and a hypnotist named Binkso, but then it actually turned into a real-life thing. Basically, it was a school that taught everyone about smiles and analyzed different people's smiles, like the Mona Lisa smile. One thing that they invented at the school was the smile mask. It was given to people with depression to wear and was believed to cure it. Basically, it was like a card with a painted smile on it that was then strapped to your face. It was thought that just by wearing a fake smile, it would automatically cure your depression. But in reality, it looks terrifying, like some sort of torture device from the Saw movies. I don't think this worked. If anything, it would have made the depression worse. Like, who wants to walk around wearing that 24/7? In our 9th spot, we have the guillotine. I'm sure you all know about this execution device. If not, pay attention in school, okay? So this consists of a razor-sharp blade attached to a rope. The victim's head was placed in the middle of the frame, and then the blade was dropped, and well, you know, the head would be severed from the rest of the body. At least it was quick and easy. As a result, they considered it to be the most humane method of execution. But still, let's not bring this back, okay? Okay. Moving on at number 8, we have the social credit system. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to smash that like button. So this next one is literally a Black Mirror episode in real life. Basically, there is a system in the works that will record your behavior and hand out points as a result. They will monitor your online presence, as well as your financial wealth, and how social you are. The better this all is, then the better your score will be. People then can check those scores, like future employers, and those with better scores will do better in society. Believe it or not, but they are already using this in China. They're currently enrolling everyone into a national database and ranking every citizen. Like I said before, this is literally like that one episode from Black Mirror. If you've seen it, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you'll also know why it's a bad idea. In our 7th spot today, we have the tub, and I'm not talking about a bathtub. No, this is another torture device used in medieval ages. So this involved placing the convicted person in a wooden tub. Only their head would be sticking out. Their face would then be painted with milk and honey, attracting flies and other insects. They would then feast on the person. You thought that was bad? Well, they would continue to feed the victim so they would, have to do their business in the bathtub and then sit in their own waste. But eventually, they were basically eaten alive by insects, which is horrifying. In our sixth spot today, we have the automatic tip requester. This next device was invented in 1955 by a man named Russell E. Oakes. It was designed primarily for hotel bellhops. So basically what it is this creepy hand that would strap onto their back. It literally looks like an arm is growing out of their lumbar spine. But anyways, after they helped the guest could then tip the bellhop by putting money on the creepy hand. The money would then fall into a cash box that was also strapped onto the bellhop. Here's the thing though, if the tip was too low, a no sale sign would pop up and inform the tipper that their tip was not enough. Which, I mean, if you ask me, is really embarrassing. Like, imagine tipping someone and they're like, oops, sorry, that's not enough, like we actually need more. So awkward. So I can see why that flopped. Not only that, but the hand on the back just looks really freaking creepy. Like, am I staying at the Haunted Mansion or what? We're now at our fifth and halfway mark with the Heretic's Fork. Basically, this was a torture device that consisted of a wrench-type device that was strapped to a victim's neck. Except both ends were super sharp. One end was pushed under the victim's chin, the other against their sternum. They were then strapped in and hung from the ceiling. Now, they had to keep their head up, because if they dropped it, then this device was going into their chest and their throat. So I'll say it so you guys don't have to. Disgusted? Seriously. Ugh. Moving on to number 4, we have the Whispering Grocery Store. Like, this just sounds creepy, and it is. So what if you were out shopping and all of a sudden you heard someone whispering in your ear? Wouldn't that freak you out? Well, companies are trying to make this a thing, where they have ads playing in grocery stores, so when you're looking at a product, the voice will be telling you all the reasons why you should buy that product. That sounds an awful lot like mind control to me. No thank you. Now, a company called the Holosonics has invented something called the Audio Spotlight System. Basically, they are tiny speakers that can be used for this, in-store advertising. But you have to be standing in the right place to hear it. It's not just like a bunch of ads playing at the same time through the grocery store's big PA system. No, that would be hectic. This is just just think of like going to a museum and listening to something that tells you about the piece of art that you're looking at. That's what it is, but 10 times creepier and totally unnecessary. Moving on to number 3, we have coffin torture. Back in the day, people had some sick torture inventions. Seriously, it's like they had fun inventing the most gruesome ways for people to die. This being one of them. Coffin torture involved placing the accused inside a caged coffin. They're locked in so they can't move at all. Sometimes they were even stripped naked before being placed in there. And then they were hung somewhere for everyone to see. The time they were stuck in there depended on their crime. Most were just left there to die, falling victim to dehydration or malnutrition. Some would even be picked to death by birds and insects. And again, they couldn't do anything about it because they were completely immobile. Coming in at number 2, we have the knee splitter. And it's as bad as it sounds. This was another pretty gruesome torture device from the medieval ages. Basically, the device was 2 wood blocks connected by 2 large screws, and it was lined with sharp spikes. This was then placed on the front of the knee and then directly behind. Then it was turned, and the blocks would move closer and closer to each other. Then the sharp metal would just dig deeper and deeper into the flesh. You get it, okay? It would completely destroy the victim's knees, and it would probably be super painful. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the TV that watches you. Technology is getting way too advanced. Like, people need to calm down. Well, Verizon has a patent for this smart TV that watches your every move. It's terrifying. It can detect your movements, sounds, and reactions to what you're watching. It then records it and creates ads that are geared specifically towards you. No thank you. Isn't that terrifying? Like, you won't have any privacy anymore. I swear, you can Google toilet plungers once, and for the next week, all the ads on your computer are gonna be for toilet plungers. It's already intense. But this has gone way too far. Not only that, but like, let's say you and your spouse are fighting while your TV is on. It's gonna detect this and legit start making ads for like couples counseling. I'm not making that up. It's insane. This is too far. Just stop. Just let us watch TV in peace. Starting off this countdown, we have the nose stylus. The fact that this is even a thing is insane. So the nose stylus is just as it sounds. A stylus you put on your nose to use your phone. But it makes you look like a terrifying version of Pinocchio or a freaking plague doctor. Like, I'm sorry, but it looks terrifying. But it's marketed as a way to use your phone hands-free. You just attach this thing onto your nose and you scroll away. I'm sorry, but it just seems like way too much work. I think it's easier for me to just use my hands. Plus, in all the advertisements, it shows the dude having one hand on the phone. So technically, it's not hands-free. The inventor claims that he came up with this idea when he was taking a bath and wanted to use his phone, but didn't want his wet hands to touch his phone. Dude, if you need to use your phone in the bath, then like that's insane. That's a phone addiction right there. I don't know, I just find this whole thing pointless and also very creepy. Like, come on, that whole thing is nightmare fuel. If I saw someone wearing that, I'd legit think that they were a demon or something. Moving on to number 9, we have the tanning beds. Now, this one probably seems like a weird invention to have on this list, but tanning beds are so bad for us, but people still continue to use them. For a while, people thought that tanning beds were safer than tanning in the sun. Wrong. They're both equally bad. In reality, tanning beds tremendously increase your risk of developing skin cancer. It also causes premature aging, and trust me, no one wants wrinkles. So the UV radiation you're exposed to from tanning beds can promote skin cancer in 2 ways. 1, it damages the DNA in your skin cells, which can cause the skin to grow abnormally and cause benign or malignant growths to develop. Or 2, it can weaken the body's immune system, which affects the body's natural defenses against cancer cells. The most dangerous form of skin cancer is melanoma. It accounts for most of the deaths due to skin cancer each year. Hence why tanning beds are not a smart invention. Like, it slowly kills you after every use. Moving on to number 8, we have the Roman candle. This is considered one of the most brutal methods of torture in the ancient world. So first, the unlucky victim would be tied to a stake and then nailed to it. Then they were covered in flammable liquid and set on fire. Hence why they were called the Roman candle. They were literally turned into human candles. This was a slow and painful way to go. Emperor Nero was known for using this as his preferred method of execution. In fact, he would use his victims literally as torches for his garden parties. Yeah, you heard me. This dude used real-life people to light up his garden. That's just sick and incredibly twisted. In our 7th spot today, we have the 3D printed death machine. Recently, a man named Dr. Philip Nitschke announced he created a 3D printed death machine known as the Sarco, short for the sarcophagus. Basically, it's a way for people to take their own lives. Literally, I'm not making this up. Who the hell would even think of creating such a thing? Obviously this guy. Anyways, the person would willingly climb into the device and slowly it would suck out all the oxygen in there so that they would slip unconscious and then die. He said it's a way to take people's lives more peacefully. But not everyone can use this device. Apparently, people that have been deemed mentally fit and have a legit reason for wanting to die can only use it. Obviously, it's a very, very controversial invention. Moving on to number 6, we have the lead sprinkler. Back in the day, people were wilding. I swear, they had contests to see who could come up with the most disturbing and gruesome torture devices out there. Like, who the heck thinks of these things? Like this device. So the lead sprinkler was a device that was filled with typically molten lead. But in other cases, it would be filled with tar, boiling oil, or even boiling water. Basically, they just wanted some sort of liquid that would burn the victim's skin right off. So basically, the victim was tied down and then the liquid in the device was sprinkled all over them, typically on their stomach or eyes. If it was poured on the eyes, it would cause the victim to go blind. If they wanted to kill the victim, they would fill the device with molten silver. That would lead to an excruciating pain until their death. So the only sprinkler I want to remember and use is the garden sprinkler. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the tongue terror. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. It was a device used to rip off or cut off a victim's tongue. First, there was a part of the device that would open the victim's mouth nice and wide. It was called the mouth opener. Very creative name, I know. So once their mouth was forced open, the tongue tearer would grab the tongue with its grippers. Once it's got a good grip, it was twisted, and this would cause it to become tighter and tighter on the victim's tongue. It took about 3 twists before the tongue would just rip off completely. Yeah, no thank you. I like my tongue the way it is. Coming in at number 4, we have the cement shoes. So this next invention was actually invented by the American Mafia. They would use it to execute their enemies. Basically, it involved placing their victims' feet inside of cinder blocks. They were then filled with wet cement. Once it was dried, they would obviously have cement all around their feet, which is incredibly heavy if you didn't know. They were then tossed into bodies of water like rivers or lakes or even the ocean. And the person would sink right down to the bottom and drown. That way, there was no mess that they had to clean up, and it would be harder for them to find the person's body, unless someone decided to dive deep down to the ocean floor. It's believed that criminals still use this to this day, which is terrifying. There could be hundreds of dead bodies out there that we just haven't found yet. Coming in at number 3, we have the Crocodile Shears. What's more terrifying than a crocodile, you ask? An alligator. No, I'm just kidding. This invention, known as the Crocodile Shears. So these were invented and used in late medieval Europe. They were typically used for men that tried to assassinate the king. And dude, this was a brutal form of torture. So this device was made of metal, and it basically was like a big pair of scissors lined with spikes on both ends that looked like crocodile teeth. Now take a guess at where these shears were placed. Right down on the male's private parts. In fact, sometimes they were heated to make it even worse. Then they were just placed down there and closed, so it would snip it right off. I know a bunch of you just flinched. Yeah, I can't imagine how painful that would be. Sometimes the victim would live. Other times, if it struck an artery, they would bleed to death. Moving on to number 2, we have the Spanish tickler. But don't be fooled by the name, okay? This device does anything but tickle you. But can we talk about tickling for a second? Like, that is a messed up form of torture on its own. Like, when you get tickled, it hurts like crazy, but at the same time, it makes you laugh. Like, make up your mind. Is it fun or is it painful? I hate it, okay? Anyways, the Spanish tickler was the set of metal claws that one could slip their hands into. The device often had 3 or 4 claws or sharp curved spikes attached to it. And like I said, it's not used for tickling. Instead, the person wearing it could dig the claws into someone's flesh and then rip it away. It literally was strong enough to tear muscle and flesh right off the victim's bones. This device also came in a variety of sizes and colors. Fun fact. Often, this device wouldn't be used to kill the victim, but instead just leave them severely wounded. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the scavenger's daughter. This next invention is incredibly messed up and brutal. It was created by Sir Leonard Skevington during the reign of Henry VIII. Basically, it was a metal rack that was shaped kind of like in an A. It would then be wrapped around a person in a crouched position. Their head was strapped to the top point of the A, the hands would be at the midpoints, and the legs near the lower ends. The frame would then fold, forcing the person's head to their knees and knees to their head, crushing them into a tiny ball. It would squeeze them so tight until blood would pour out from their nose and ears. Yeah, no thank you. No thank you. And I'm glad that this isn't a thing anymore because it was mainly used for women.